Hello, everyone. I hope you are all having a great day wherever you may be today. And I hope you guys had a great weekend and are looking forward to this week's sessions in the Rootstock Educate. So today we have a really exciting workshop by Joseph from ThirdWeb. And I will be inviting him on stage now so that he can give his workshop to all of you. Hello. It's nice to see you guys interacting in the chat. And I hope you guys are excited for today's workshop. It should be really fun. Joseph will be teaching you guys how to accelerate building on Rootstock with ThirdWeb. Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hey.
In clear?
Yes, all good. Whenever you're ready to share your screen and begin, the stage is all yours.
Perfect. Let me share my screen with you all here. There we go. Cool. Hello, everyone. I am so happy to be here along with Encode and Rootstock to tell you guys a little bit about how you can further accelerate your development on Rootstock with ThirdWeb tooling. A quick show of hands in the chat. Who here has heard of ThirdWeb before? If you have, let me know. Let me know your experience with it and what your favorite thing about ThirdWeb is, or what you built with it so far. I'm always open to hearing about people's experiences. In the meantime, I am Joe. I am a solutions engineer here at ThirdWeb, and I am going to be talking a little bit about how you can use our tooling to accelerate your building on the Rootstock network. Really cool stuff today. We're going to go through everything what ThirdWeb is, a little bit of code for Solidity, and as well as a small demo that we can do. And it kind of encapsulates and puts all of our tooling together for you all to be able to use to accelerate your development in this ecosystem. So real quick, we're going to go over what is ThirdWeb, right? What are we? What do we do? What can we help you with? And at its core, you can think of ThirdWeb as a full stack open source Web3 development platform. Now, there could be a lot of buzzwords on that. There could be a lot of kind of key points that hit in that simple statement. So what does it mean to be full stack? This means that we offer tooling for both front end, back end, and on-chain development for anyone using ThirdWeb who wants to build on Rootstock, who wants to build your Web3 applications, scale your businesses. This means that you can have a single source to have all of these aspects of Web3 development covered for your development. Now, not only are we full stack in the sense that we cover anything for logins, contracts, or even scalability, but we're also full stack in the sense that we have a wide range of platforms that we cover. For example, if you want to make web apps with TypeScript or React, maybe you want to make mobile applications with React Native, or even gaming applications with Unity, .NET, or even Unreal Engine. We have SDKs for all of these use cases and all of these platforms, so that way you guys can build native Web3 applications that are performant, they're fast, they're reliable, they're scalable, all within the ThirdWeb platform. So I'm going to go in a little bit on what each of these buckets means. It's a heavy portfolio of supported tech, I agree, man, and that's what we're here for. We're going to go into a little bit about what each of these buckets are. So real quick, front end. What do we mean when we talk about front end? What is a developer building a Web3 need to know about front end? So this is anything with wallet connectors, right? You guys see it everywhere. Connect a wallet. And you see that pop up, either MetaMask, Coinbase, 350 other different wallets that we support. These are all the wallet connectors. We have in-app wallets, which are becoming super popular, especially if you want to onboard Web2 users. So these are your social logins. This is Gmail. This is Yahoo, or rather Apple, Facebook. We have a whole bunch of different social logins that we support out of the box, as well as being able to bring in any auth that you might have. If you have your own custom authentication, you can bring that in as well to have your users log in into your app. Our front end also composes things like contract SDKs. If you want to be able to display NFTs to your users, if you want to be able to display on-chain data to your users, you can use our front-end SDKs that I mentioned before, right? Whether it's TypeScript, React, any of our Unity SDKs, any of these SDKs that you want to use, you can use for your front end. We have a payment section, so that way you guys can use Fiat on-ramps if you are using your developers for any kind of on-ramping of funds for your users, right? You don't want to send them out to a different application. You don't want to send them to a different website. You can actually use fiat on ramps natively within your application so that users can onboard funds and you get ready to embark on their journey within your app without ever having to leave. This means that you have increased conversions, your users stay within your app longer, they're less likely to leave mid-cycle. Very, very helpful. And not only can you guys provide the service for your users, but payments actually has a rev share model. So for every dollar that goes through, there's a 1% fee. Now, 70% of this fee goes back to you directly, the developer, which is great because it means now that you have another source to generate revenue and increase your runway as you develop your applications, as you build out your businesses, and as you scale. So, this is a very, very interesting and highly appreciative model that you guys can use for fiat on ramping and payments. And then next up, we have ecosystem wallets. Ecosystem wallets, we all know and love the traditional wallets such as Coinbase, MetaMask, and even social logins. But the problem with these is that currently they're scoped to an application, right? So what does that mean? That means that if I were to log into application A, I have one wallet. If I log into application B, totally different wallet address, totally different set of assets, set of currencies. And ecosystem wallets actually allows you to unify those wallets for a user. So now the user who logs in, they have a, for example, Encode wallet or a Rootstock wallet, right? A user comes in, logs into application A. They have one wallet address. They will use the same ecosystem wallet, log into application B, and it's the exact same wallet address. It's the exact same assets that they have access to. It's a unified identity, very popular among gaming applications. So if you're familiar with traditional games like Riot, Blizzard, you know they have their Riot IDs and Battle.net accounts. This is very similar to that kind and style of identity. So just remember, ecosystem wallets let you combine wallet assets and have the exact same wallet address between different applications. Very, very huge and powerful for your users. So here, I'm going to take some quick question here. While our ThirdWeb planning to support abstract accounts, Bootien, ThirdWeb does support account abstraction. We already have this in our toolkit. If you need to create your own account factories, if you need your own smart accounts, you can go in through our contracts, deploy these for your chains that have account abstraction enabled, and we are good to go. If you are looking for a chain that needs account abstraction, reach out to us. Let us know what chain you want, and we are more than happy to work with that chain and get account abstraction enabled for you all. This is the beauty of our network. This is the beauty of our open source ideology. We're always growing, always happy to involve the community in whatever we build. So that's all the front end stuff. What about on chain, right? On chain means we need contracts, right? We have ways for users to log into our application, but now we need ways for us, the developers, to control and make rule sets around our application, right? So this usually comes in the form of contracts. Now, with ThirdWeb, we have audited and modular contracts already. What this means is you don't have to spend time building from scratch your own contracts. We have a whole host of pre-builds that you guys can use either from our dashboard, our CLI, and not only are these already created for you, but they're already audited. So you guys save on the cost of having to audit a contract yourself. And now, as I mentioned, these come in a wide variety of deployment tools. So you can either do it through our UI, through our dashboard, or you can do it through the CLI if you guys are a little bit more developer focused. And we'll go through that. We actually have a section here that will talk about contracts and why it might be beneficial for you guys to use ThirdWeb pre-builds over creating it yourself. And so finally, we have our backend section. This is something called ThirdWeb Engine. And this backend is all about scaling and automating transactions of your application. So as you guys grow, as you guys build out your applications and you have more and more users, you're going to have more and more transactions. And this means that you need a way to be able to scale that number of transactions, right? So with our backend services, we actually enable you to do a couple things. One, you can do gasless transactions through our backend service. Again, this is kind of connected to account abstraction that we have. You can do things with our backend wallets. And a backend wallet is a very novel idea. You can create a wallet, store it in this ThirdWeb Engine cloud server, And you can use this wallet to do a couple of things. One, you can transact on behalf of users, right? You can use this wallet and say, hey, I want to cover the gas fee for this user. I'm going to use my backend wallet to pay for that gas. You can use your backend wallet as relayers. You can use your backend wallet for meta transactions, right? Maybe you want your user to sign, but the backend wallet is actually at the end of the day paying for it. And now, not only do you have the ability to transact on behalf of users, but let's say you have some transactions and you want to be able to automate things like gas and you want to be able to automate things like nonce management. So if transactions fail, traditionally a user has to go back in, they have to up their nonce manually in their wallet, they have to increase the gas so that it gets confirmed on the blockchain. All of that is very manual and it takes the user experience out of your application, right? It makes it really Web3, which we don't really like. So with ThirdWeb Engine, you can automate all this stuff. If a transaction fails, Engine will automatically increase that gas and increase that nonce so that the transaction can go through successfully. And it will do this over and over until that transaction is successful. You can do things like specify how often you want this to happen. You can specify limits. You can have full control of this engine instance to work for your use cases. So we talked about the three sections, right? Logging in, our backend, and our contracts. So now what I want to do is I want to go a little bit about contracts. I know not everyone is a Solidity dev, and so sometimes you think about a contract and you're kind of left wondering, what is it? Why do I need it? What is it useful for? So here's a very simple, very, very basic contract. This is the written in Solidity, which is the most popular code for contracts for EVM environments. There are others that you can write it in. But when you're working with EVM like Rootstock, you can actually use Solidity to build these contracts, right? So very simple. What does all this mean? What am I looking at here? So for example, at the very top, we've already mentioned that we're using Solidity. We have a line where we're actually defining what our compiler is, and our compiler is how do we take this human readable code and turn it into something the machine or the blockchain understands, right? So we define that at the very top here, and most contracts, as you write them, are going to follow object-oriented programming because they're written in Solidity. And then we're going to have things like imports. So we need to know what libraries are we using. Most popular are going to be OpenZeppelin, right? You're going to be looking at contracts that OpenZeppelin has already wrote. You're going to be importing them into your own. These are already standards that the Web3 community has decided, okay, you know what? These are great. We're going to pull these into our contracts. And this is kind of a basis of what we all want to work with. And then, so after importing libraries, we need to do things like, okay, as we create our contract, we need to define kind of contract is it, right? So in this instance, we're saying, hey, my simple NFT is an ERC 721. After that, we have to do things like defining constructors, right? What is a constructor? Well, when I first deploy this contract, what is its name? What is its symbol, right? And that's what we're doing here in this constructor. Then you see here that we have a function, just very simple, a mint function, mint NFT. This is very common that you'll see out there in the world as you look at NFTs. You need a way for users to be able to mint these things, right? As you can see, it has things like what's the address, what's the token URI, which is usually an IPFS URL, or even a private database that you guys might be handling. You can use an HTTP for that. And then we have things like a counter, right? So as we mint NFTs, as we start going through and having users acquire NFTs, they usually start at 0. And as a user mints, it will increase the counter for that token. So this is all the stuff you need for a very, very basic, super bare bone contract. And again, this contract, it's missing a couple stuff, right? So what is it missing? Here you can see we have our mint NFT. But sometimes people want to be able to transfer tokens. Sometimes people want to be able to burn their token, right? And that just means sending it to the 0 address. This means that they don't want to hold it in their wallet. They actually want to send it out and send it to the 0 address for whatever chain they're working with. This contract's missing things like mint control. If you want to have a whitelisting, if you want to allow lists for users to mint before the general public, all of this kind of functionality is missing from this kind of contract. This contract's not upgradable. While we have constructors, we need something called an initializer. And an initializer will actually set initial values for every instance of this contract. So this is something that's missing from here as well. And then we have a couple other things, right? So function modifiers for different functions that we have, such as view or only owner. Sometimes you want to restrict, depending on the function, who can actually write to that function, who can actually look at that function if it's a read only, meaning it's not going to do any changes to the blockchain. These are all modifiers that you have to be aware of as you build out your contracts. And finally, and one of the most important aspects is this basic contract doesn't have any security for or protections, right? And one of the most common I'm sure you've heard of is reentrancy. And this means it's very broad. It's an ability for a user to write to this contract, and then as during the transaction that they're writing to, they can actually come back into the contract and work with functions that they normally wouldn't be allowed to, right? So this is a very huge security risk, and this is something that happens to a lot of people who are first time building out their contracts. And it can be very, very devastating, especially if you've already have collections out there or projects or businesses out there in the tens of thousands, right? So these are all the things that are missing from a very simple Solidity contract build. Now, how does ThirdWeb help mitigate some of this? So ThirdWeb has a whole host of pre-built contracts. And so we mentioned this earlier on the on-chain aspect. And what's amazing about our pre-builts is one, they're already audited. If you've gone and you've created contracts yourself and you've gone for a security audit, you know that these things are pricey. They're hundreds of dollars per contract. Anytime you make a change in a contract, you have to get another audit just to ensure that you haven't introduced any new security risks, to make sure that everything you've done before is still working and nothing's popped up between deployments. And so we already have taken that care of that for you with our pre-builds. You guys using pre-builds, even though ThirdWeb has built them, you guys still retain ownership over all of the contracts. This means you guys can do permission changes. You guys can change settings and updates for royalties, for any sort of revenue that might be coming through these contracts. You guys are the owners of these contracts. So great job. We've done the hard lifting, heavy lifting, and we want you all to be able to benefit 100% from these contracts. These pre-builts, as I mentioned, whole host of deployable tooling that we have. You can either do it through our UI, you can do it through a CLI. So if you have a terminal, you can just do a quick npx thirdweb deploy command, or you can even do it programmatically within your applications. So that means you guys can actually build out applications that will help users deploy their own contracts, right? You can build web apps that do exactly what we do to deploy contracts on behalf of your users, and that's totally fine. We want that. We encourage people to build these kinds of apps because in our minds, it's all about growing the pie. And what that means is we want to be able to provide tooling and help people be able to build the things they want to build without any sort of gatekeeping. All of this stuff is free to start. You guys can go ahead and go to thirdweb.com, make a quick account, and get started today with all of this. You don't need to pay for anything. You can go ahead and get started with all of these contracts on Rootstock, both testnet and mainnet, and start deploying your own contracts through ThirdWeb's pre-builds. And so you can do things like, manage all your contracts. You can build with the different protocols. You can use some default libraries that we have, or anything custom that you might want to own. You can use with these contracts as well. So what does that mean, right? I'm talking about all these pre-builts. I'm talking about all these different kinds of contracts. So what does that mean? What does that actually look like? So if you go to thirdweb.com/explore, you can look at the contracts, both pre-builts that we have, and you can see things like NFT drops. This is your traditional ERC 721. You can look at things like edition drops. This is your 1155, right? So if you want multiple copies of an NFT, this is going to be your edition drop. You can do things like account factory. I know Vu Tian was asking about AA. You can deploy your own account factory contracts to enable AA. You can do things like staking contracts. You can do loyalty card or membership contracts. You can do burn to mint contracts, token contracts, ERC20 contracts, right? So you can create your own custom tokens. This is only the popular stuff. We have way more than contracts in this. For example, we have things like open edition contracts. We have things like split contracts. If you want to on chain designate who gets funds from a wallet address, right? You can send those funds to a contract, and that contract will automatically split between a list of wallets that you designate. So I encourage you all to go through thirdweb.com/explore, look at all the contracts we have, and see what might work for your use cases. Again, we are available on Rootstock testnet, so you guys can actually use the testnet to deploy some of this stuff. And so here's a little example of what it might look like outside of the UI, right? So the previous screen was from our dashboard. Click, no code necessary, very easy to follow. And here on the left-hand side, if you want to make a project, if you want to deploy your own contracts, right? We give you the option and the ability to do so right through our dashboard, right through your CLI, rather, right through your project. And so you can do things through either Forge or Hard Hat, which are the most popular kind of packages and toolings that you guys use for contract creation. You can either do things like start from scratch, or if you already have a contract, you can install ThirdWeb tooling on top of a contract you've already created, and then once you're ready, do the CLI, do npx ThirdWeb deploy, and you can push that contract into your dashboard. So that way, even though it wasn't created with ThirdWeb, still have access to your contract through ThirdWeb's dashboard. Huge, right? You can have all of these contracts that you've created before, bring them into your ThirdWeb dashboard so you have a central place to manage all of them. It doesn't matter that they weren't created from ThirdWeb. As long as you guys bring them into your dashboard, you can do all of this management as well. And so that's our pre-builts. We also have something called modular contracts. Modular contracts are really powerful in that they allow you to swap out functionality, right? So here in this image, I think is one of the best examples on what that means, right? So we have something called core contracts. So in this example, I'm using 721. So ERC 721 core contracts. That's that very light pink building block on the bottom, right? So what does a ERC 721 contract usually want? They want to either be mintable, maybe they want soulbound functionality, right? And say at first, you, the developer, say, I want soulbound, right? So you can put that functionality onto your contract. And at a later date, you realize your community wants to be able to transfer them. Your community might want to be able, your user base is actually asking for the ability to transfer. You can actually remove that soulbound functionality and instead replace it with transferable functionality. Your user base has the exact same NFT. Your user base is interacting with the same contract. However, you were actually able to upgrade that contract and transfer out the soulbound and put in a transferable function. Very, very powerful stuff. You guys can, this means that your contracts can now evolve and grow with your businesses. They can evolve and grow with your applications. And so a very common use case and example that I see all the time for this type of contract is people who make their own ERC20 tokens. So let's say, for example, you're a user, you've made your own ERC20 token, and usually you need a place to launch it, right? You need either a liquidity pool or some sort of DEX that you're going to be able to put this ERC20 on. That service will usually have a preliminary scanning, and this scanning will check the contract and look for functions such as, hey, are you still an admin of this contract, or have you renounced ownership? Are you still having a mintable function on this contract, right? All of these kinds of things can actually pop up false positives. So for example, you can say, hey, my contract has mintable, but I've actually revoked access so that no one can call mintable. Well, guess what? Because mintable still exists on that contract, the scan's going to pick it up. With modular contracts, you can remove the mintable function completely and the scan will come up clean. And this is huge who are building DeFi applications with their own tokenomic system. So that's a very common use case that I see for these kinds of modular contracts here. Real quick, I'm going to go to the chat. Gabriel, ThirdWeb wallet helped me a ton in some hackathons. Now with Rootstock, I hope to be successful in developing for Bitcoin. Gabriel, my friend, you have just hit the nail on the head on why Rootstock is so powerful, right? You can now use EVM tooling to develop for Bitcoin. That's huge. That's huge. No longer are there these invisible walls between EVM and Bitcoin, right? And BTC. So now you guys can actually develop on Bitcoin using EVM tooling. One of the best EVM toolings, ThirdWeb, right? Fully fully compatible with anything that you guys want to do on Rootstock. Super huge. I'm glad you put that in the chat. Thank you very much for putting that in there. And so now I want to show you guys a little bit something. This is our playground. I'm going to put a link here for you all in the chat. And I want you guys to be able to go ahead and take a look at it. This is going to be a very useful resource for you all. Let me actually, let's see. I want to make sure the screen here. Perfect. This is where I think most of the people who are just getting started, right? I get asked all the time, hey, I'm just getting started. Where's the best place I can go to play around with ThirdWeb, see some of the functionality without having to build anything, right? And so the answer is going to be this playground. So if you click that link, you'll see this screen, and you have a couple different options. So as part of the playground, we have something called our sign-in stuff, right? Remember those 3 buckets: front end, contract, and back end? We went through contracts, and I want to go and talk to you a little bit about the front end, right? What does that sign-in look like? What is that component? So we're going to go ahead, click on sign-in, and this is going to be our connect portion. This is going to be your best friend, especially if you don't know a lot of code, right? Say on the right-hand side here, you want a modal that looks like this. You want to be able to support certain social logins for in-app wallets. Right? On this left-hand side, I can actually pick and choose which social logins I want to support. Maybe I'm saying, hey, you know what? Farcaster was a fad. I want to get rid of it. You notice on the right-hand side, Farcaster always goes away. Say, hey, you know what? I'm a gaming-focused app on Rootstock. I want to be able to have Twitch login. I want to be able to have Steam login. You can select these, and it comes into the app as well. Now, one of the most powerful bits of this is that once you've built this out, up here, there's this code tab. If I click on that code tab, I now get the exact code needed to build out that component. Very, very powerful stuff. And again, here, right, I can look at the code and I can say, you know what? I still want Steam, but Twitch is a little weird for me right now. I want to remove it. And it updates your code. You know what? I like EOA wallets, but for some reason, I don't like MetaMask anymore. You can click on it and it removes MetaMask, right? So this is very powerful, and especially for those who are just getting started with ThirdWeb, especially for those who are just starting to learn about our SDKs, what's useful for them, what you can use in use cases. Look at this code, build out your UI, and then copy and paste this code directly into your application. Very, very powerful stuff. Now, not only can you do with what wallets you want to support, but you have a whole host of different options like, hey, the modal pop-up, maybe I want a specific image. Maybe I want to show ThirdWeb branding or not. Maybe I want to change whether it's a compact versus wide. All of these options are available to you. If you want to use sign-in with Ethereum, you can do that here. If I were to enforce it, it tells you exactly how to perform that function, right? Very powerful stuff. Again, account abstraction, right? So here, what if we want account abstraction? How does that work? What does that look like when using ThirdWeb tooling? Well, if I were to come into this playground, click account abstraction, you see here that all it did was add 3 lines of code. And that's all it takes. It takes 3 lines of code for you guys to be able to have account abstraction and gasless transactions for your users. So if you notice, when I click account abstraction, it says, hey, when a user comes into Connect for their account abstraction, and depending on what chain they're working with, we're going to go ahead and sponsor gas. Yes or no? Very, very simple. And so what happens is at the front, ThirdWeb will actually pay, and they'll pay the gas fees for that transactions. And then on the account level, right, at the end of the month, we'll actually show on your account how many transactions, what the value of that gas was that ThirdWeb has sponsored, and then you guys can actually through your account go back and pay for that service yourself. Now, this is really powerful in that you guys don't have to manage any sort of gas wallets. You can if you want. There's a whole bunch of different ways we can do account abstraction. For this very basic example, it is done through your account on ThirdWeb. But you can do things like maybe you want to use engine backend wallets, and you can fund these wallets yourself. And that way you know exactly how much gas you're sponsoring, right? So say, hey, I only want to sponsor $100 in gas, right, for a month. You can do that with your engine backend wallets. You can also specify these kinds of things within your ThirdWeb dashboard. You can specify all of these configurations and gas sponsorship opportunities that you want within your ThirdWeb dashboard. And again, you see here, hey, there's a account abstraction section. Yep, come here, play around with it, see what the UX is, right? We show you all of this because we know that it is important from a developer perspective to not only see the code, but to also see the user journey, right? We want to be able to show that user experience as well. So you can do things like, what does it look like for our Connect components? What does it look like if we want to sponsor gas on behalf of a transaction, right? So here we actually show a transaction that you guys can do that has gas sponsorship. And then we also have things like, hey, maybe we were doing a native AA, right? What does that look like? We have things like, again, our Fiat on-ramper, right? That we talked about earlier. What does that look like? What does it look like if I want to use that Fiat on-ramper to sell physical goods? How do I get those funds, right? You can specify your seller address here through a mode called direct payment. Okay, you know what? I'm Web3. I'm all digital. What does that look like? Well, you can click on this link here to see what that looks like and what kind of code is needed, what kind of user experience is coming through as we sign in. And this is all, again, free. You don't have to make an account. You don't have to put in any card information. This is for you guys to go through and play around. So if you're looking at building some of these kind of experiences and you're looking at, okay, well, maybe I want to use ThirdWeb tooling, go to the playground, click around. You're not going to break anything. Nothing's irreversible that you do here, right? It's all test nets that you're working with here. And then play around with it, see what you're working with, and get not only the code, but also the UI experience for your users on what kind of use cases you like to follow. So that's my rant on Playground. I love it. It's amazing. We'll probably come back to it for Engine just a little bit. But yeah, anyone in the chat, visit that link. Let me know your thoughts. Mohammed, first time I've properly understood gasless transactions. I am so happy, my friend. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out. Back to our presentation here. So, ThirdWeb Engine, right? We've talked about our front end. We've talked about how to log in users. We've talked about contracts. We've talked about how to govern, how to create rule sets around our projects. Now we need to talk about Engine. And what is Engine? What is its use case? What's it for? Remember, this is our back end bucket. So Engine is the way you scale your apps. Engine is the way you want to perform blockchain transactions from an API call. Okay, cool. So now I'm a developer. I don't want to learn any new SDKs, right? But I also want to still use ThirdWeb. Is that possible? And the answer is yes. So if you're a developer and you're already familiar with API endpoints, if you're familiar with fetch requests, simple HTTP requests, Engine is going to be your best friend. Because now not only does it cut your development time in half because you already know how to use endpoints, right? We have a whole list of endpoints that you can call. And I'm actually going to put this link in chat as well so you all can take a look at it. There we go. Engine cuts down development time. You have all these list of endpoints that you guys can use. Anything in our SDK that you want to do, you can do in Engine. So if you are doing token transfers, if you want to get, for this example here, we're getting the balance of a backend wallet, right? As you can see, simple API call. You create your Engine instance. It's a cloud-hosted instance server, so you have a URL that you can access. And then from there, you just say, hey, I want to access a backend wallet, right? I want to work on chain like Rootstock. So the chain would be a 30 or 31, depending whether you're doing mainnet or testnet. You can put in the backend wallet address that you actually want to get this balance for. And then finally, we specify the get balance kind of path for our API endpoint, right? And that's all you need. After that, you can shoot this off on your application. It will go through, it will read the blockchain and return it to your application. And this image here is actually, I think, one of the best ways to explain it. So you have your app front end that you've built. This is everything your user interacts with, all the login stuff, all the buttons on the app that you click. And then you have your back end. This is all of the data massaging that you guys might do, right? So say example, clicks a button, the user clicks a button. On your back end, you want it to perform an action, right? One of those actions is, for example, getting a wallet balance. That backend will now talk to Engine, right? Your backend says, "Hey, a user clicked this button. I want Engine to call this get balance function," and Engine, out hosted service, will perform that call. It has its own host of wallets that it can use to transact on behalf of users. Remember, these are your backend wallets, and then it will actually interact with the blockchain and come back with your information, either updated states, maybe you have transactions that you called or transactions that you performed. All of this will come back to your engine, and then again, you can use that information to update your backend, and then finally your front end, right? So very, very powerful tooling here. This is your gateway into blockchain transactions through API calls. So Matthias, is Engine an indexer? No, Engine is not an indexer, but I am so happy you brought that up because we'll talk about indexing with ThirdWeb a little bit later. So is it more wallet as a service? Engine is neither, right? Engine is your scalability service. Engine is your blockchain transaction management tool, right? So again, as you build out your applications, you guys are going to have hundreds of thousands of transactions come through your application, right? And I mean hundreds of thousands. I believe in you all. Everyone who's here in this workshop is here because you want to build applications. Is here because you're providing value, right? So all of you here are going to have this level of transaction throughput on your applications, and so Engine is going to help you manage that. If transactions fail, guess what? Engine will automatically retry those transactions. If you want to do relayers or gas sponsorship outside of our traditional account abstraction stack, right? You can use Engine for that. If you guys want to do things like smart accounts, transact on behalf of users with smart accounts, you can use Engine. Anything that you guys want to do for the SDK, again, you can use Engine for. So Engine is going to be a very, very powerful tool for anyone building on Rootstock and anyone building in Web3. So now comes a real cool part, right? How do we put all this stuff together? What does it look like? What does the code look like? What are we trying to accomplish? And so here I made a very simple NFT mint site, right? This is common. You see this kind of thing all the time. And if you know, we went through our contract flow already where I showed you, okay, what does it look like to mint a contract? What kind of contracts are we looking at? And so we want to build this NFT mint site. What does that look like? First off, if you guys are building it from scratch, right? This is a web app. You guys can actually use one of our templates, use our building tool called NPX ThirdWeb Create, and we will guide you through setting up a project, right? And so for what does that look like? You'll see things like, okay, well, what kind of project do you want to create? Are you creating an app? Are you creating a contract? Or are you making an extension for your contract? You can actually follow one of these three options to help build out whatever you're trying to accomplish. So in this instance, we want to build an app, right? So we go ahead, click on app, and it will ask you a series of questions. What's the name of your application? Do you want to use Next.js, Vue, any of these kinds of templates? And then after that, it'll say, okay, here it is, built out. You're good to go. Very, very simple, easy to follow and understand. Now, after that, what are some code snippets, right? What does it look like to use some of our SDK tooling, and what does it look like to actually interact with ThirdWeb and some of the contracts that we deployed? Now, if you're looking for some contracts, right? Again, I'm going to go here to this Explorer page and say you want to deploy a contract. Very simple. You click this deploy button, right? And then you can fill in any of this information that you might have for your contract, such as name, image, all of this stuff. You can choose a chain. So here, Ethereum, no. We know a better chain and we want to say Rootstock. So again, you can either do Rootstock mainnet or testnets here. Just for sake of this example, I'm going to do testnets. And then I can click on deploy now. Let's go ahead and do token test. That's fine. Deploy now. And what it's going to do is it's going to actually start the process of deploying this contract on chain. I am actually logged in with my wrong account, but that's okay. You guys get the gist of it. Once you do that, it will actually deploy the contract and you can go through your dashboard and see what that looks like. So after that's done, we're going to come back here and we're going to say, okay, what if I want to, for example, create my sign-in components, right? Again, first thing that we need to do, we need to create sign-in and login stuff for our users. So how do we do that? In this example, I'm actually doing two things. I am one, creating a classic Connect component, right? Where we have things like EOA access. And then I'm also creating a social login, right? Where we have things like um, email, Gmail, we have Apple, Facebook, all of this stuff. So what does that look like in the terms of the code? One, we need to create a client. And so when you go to thirdweb.com and you log in for the very first time, you'll be able to create an API key. So what does that API key look like? Let's actually go here and show you, right? So here we're going to go into our ThirdWeb account. Again, this is going to be on your ThirdWeb account when you first log in. We're going to go ahead and click on projects. And so as you log in, we need an API key to be able to use ThirdWeb tooling. So we're going to go ahead and click on add a new, go ahead and add a project. And this project I'm going to be calling Rootstock, right? Rootstock demo. Let's go ahead and do that. And now what we need to do is we need to define what domains we want our demo key to be able to access, right? Who are we allowing to use our API key? So for most testing, you can do localhost 3000. For the sake of this demo, I'm actually going to say, hey, anyone and everyone can use this demo key. That's totally fine. Just make sure that when you guys do this on your own, you specify which domains you actually want to use. This is going to be your www.applicationname.com, right? That's going to be that domain. If you're doing anything like for sale sites, make sure you put these in as well. We're going to go ahead and hit create. It's going to do two things. One, you're going to get a client ID. This client ID can be front facing, totally fine. You can share this with everyone. That's not going to harm anything. And you'll get a secret key. Now, your secret key, you guys want to make sure you copy because it's only going to ever be shown to you once on this screen. This secret key is going to be used for any backend stuff, right? You don't want this client facing. You don't want to be exposing this secret key to your users. So anything back facing is going to be where you use your secret key. Once you have that, you're going to go ahead and hit confirm, complete. And you see that now you have a API key pair for a certain project. Now this is cool because this means that if you have multiple projects, you guys can actually create multiple API key pairs. And under our analytics system, it will actually separate, okay, I have this many users in project A, this many users in project B, this many requests. Very, very useful, especially if you guys are building out multiple applications. And so that's all in the creating a client, right? So we've created this client. And this client is where we put in our client ID that we saw earlier. Again, this is front facing, totally fine to expose. And then for our component itself, we need to say, okay, well, what chain are we working on? And to do that, we can provide a define chain function, pass in our chain ID. In this example, we have 31, which is Rootstock test network, right? We can use this chain ID, pass it into our components. So for example, our connect button component, very simple. If you want a very easy to read, easy to use connect button component, you can use just connect button, pass in the client that we created, pass in the chain we're working with. And just like that, right here, I've actually highlighted it. Just like that, one line of code is all you need. And boom, you have a very, very well thought out connect button component. Again, you can use this for all the code. Remember in the playground, you can copy and paste that code snippet into your apps, and you will see a very similar or your custom built component for this stuff, right? What about social logins? What if I just want social logins on my app? So that is going to be this section here, where again, you pass in your client, pass in the chain you're working on, in this case, Rootstock Test Network. And now what we're actually doing is I have a list of wallets, right? And those wallets can either be authenticated with Google, Apple, Facebook, phone, Discord, email, Farcast, or Steam. Again, anything you guys put it in that ThirdWeb playground, you can just copy and paste directly into your application. So that way, in this instance, I actually have the label social login. And when a user clicks on it, it will show all of the login methods that you've defined as wanting to use, right? You've defined, for example, here I've defined email, I've defined phone numbers, Google, Apple, it's all here. And that's all you need to create a login method. Very, very quick, very, very powerful. Again, it took us, 5 minutes to go through this stuff? If you've already done the customization on the playground, even less time because it's copy and paste into your application. Super, super quick time to get building, to get started. Offer a login button. Very, very quick. Now, next up, okay, I've done login stuff, right? Now I want to be able to transact. I want to be able to go on the blockchain. I want my users who I've created these NFTs for. I want to be able to have a button where they click they click the button, and I get that NFT. How do we do that? Again, we can have a whole host of components that we use. One of them being specifically a claim button. This means you don't have to build out your own buttons. You don't have to worry about your own transactions that you're building out. You can use ThirdWebs. So what does that look like? So in this example, I'm actually have a couple things. One, very simple. I just wanted to have one, I'm working with an ERC 1155. This means that I have multiple copies of an NFT that I want to be able to use. And I want to have some randomness to what a user gets, right? So here we have things like, okay, let's say between 0 and 2, I want to be able to pick a random number, and our user will get an NFT depending on what number they get, right? Very simple. Again, we define what chain we're working on. In this case, I'm making a variable called rootstock test. So that way we work on the rootstock test network. And for our claim button component specifically, a couple things that we need. We need a contract address. So remember, in our dashboard, as we've deployed these contracts, we'll get back a contract address, and we can plug that in here. We need to define what chain we're working on. Again, rootstock test. We need to define what client we're working with. Remember, this client is what we've created before. It has our client ID. It's what's going to associate our application to a certain project on our dashboard. And so now we need to specify some sort of claim parameters. So things like, what kind of contract are we working with? In this case, an 1155. How many NFTs, when a user clicks this button, do you want to be able to award or have that user mint? In my example, I'm only doing one. And then what's the token ID of the NFT? You can hard code this. Maybe you have certain membership tiers and you guys want to hard code 0, 1, or 2. No worries. Or in my case, remember, I've actually done a random one. It's going to choose a random number and have that user uh, claim that NFT. And so all of this, if you are familiar with building up transactions, you can see immediately how this is so much easier and faster. I'm not specifying gas. I'm not specifying a value to send. I'm not specifying the contract function and all of its arguments that it needs, right? The claim button does all of that for us behind the scenes. So again, your code is more readable, your code is more maintainable, and the time to development is cut exponentially because of how quick these components allow you to develop. Super, super cool stuff. So what does it look like UX wise when a user clicks on this button, right? These parameters, user clicks on the button, very, very similar. If they have MetaMask, they'll pop up a transaction on their EOA, MetaMask, Coinbase, whatever they've decided to sign in with. They're very traditional. They can either hit confirm, reject, and they're good to go. And finally, they'll have their NFT. Very, very simple, very, very easy and clean to use. Now, what if I want to interact with the blockchain and read some data, right? Cool. I've done some right stuff. I've minted NFTs. Awesome. But I want to be able to show this to my user, right? I want to be able to show maybe their account information, or in this instance, what NFT they purchased on this site. So to do that, very simple, right? I've actually defined a little thing called mint area. Again, what chain are we working with? I have some helper functions in React. If you guys are familiar with web dev, nothing new here. And so first for this, what we're going to do is we're going to get the contract we want to work with, right? And so again, to do this, we have a function called get contract. Very easy, very simple to use, right? So here, if we go ahead and use our get contract function, we're going to pass in our client. We're going to pass in the chain that we're working with, and we're going to pass in the address of our contract. All of this stuff available to us from our ThirdWeb dashboard. Remember, go to thirdweb.com, make your account, you can view all of this stuff, deploy your contracts, get your API keys very, very simply. So once we have that contract, this is the object that we're going to be using to get any sort of information out as well. So once we have that, we have things called extensions. Now, extensions are how we cut down on this huge level of code that you might need for building out transactions. So if you've done transaction building before, again, you need things like gas, value. You need all of the function arguments. You need all the types for those function arguments, right? You need to be able to do all of these things, prepare your transaction, to send your transaction, and to finally get the receipt of what you sent. All of that takes more and more lines of code. With ThirdWeb, you can use extensions. In this case, we're using the get own NFT extension to cut down on all that code. So this example says, okay, I want to get the owned NFTs for a user. Perfect. ThirdWeb SDK knows exactly what to do on the backend for that. All it needs to know is what contract are you working with. We already got the contract, so now we're going to pass that in to this extension. How many NFTs do you want to get for this user? Does the user have a low amount? Are you expecting the user to have a high amount? You specify that with start and count, right? And what's the address for your user? In this instance, we can actually use things like React hooks, TypeScript to get the account that's currently connected. So you can either do things like use active account if you're using hooks. If wallets are connecting directly through TypeScript, you can use that connected wallet and pass that address in here. And so once a user does all of this, once you, the developer, perform this, a user clicks on that button, view dynos, they can see their dyno, right? So not only have you already, in a span of 20 minutes, found a way to mint NFTs, create contracts, but now you've also have shown a way to have these NFTs be shown to your users, right? Very, very simple. Super awesome, super clean. So that's our tech demo, right? That's building with ThirdWeb tooling and Rootstock. Something I want to talk about now is insights, right? This is our indexer platform. This is what was alluded to earlier in the chat was, hey, is Engine an indexer? Nope, Engine's not an indexer. We actually have our own indexer, and you guys can go ahead and play around with it, see what is available to you. And I'm going to put that link here in chat for you all. There you go. You can click on that link, go to thirdweb.com/insights. You can read all about what insights are and how it can be helpful. So here's an example of what that screen might look like. As you can see here, we can do things like defining chain IDs, defining what transactions we want to look at. Very simple. What makes this different from other insight products or indexer products is that you don't need to have a subset of data in order to read from the blockchain, right? So what ThirdWeb does is we actually index it on our own, and you can use simple API endpoint calls to pull that information out, right? If you can do things like, hey, I want to look at events. And so if you're familiar with contracts before, you know that events are some things that are emitted once a transaction occurs. So you have things like transfer events, right? It's emitted and it shows, hey, this is a transfer occurred. You have burn events, you have mint events, you have a whole host of events that are very common in the space, as well as any custom events that you guys might want to have, right? You can build out custom events and have ThirdWeb insights feed into those events as well. Now, it's only not event based. You can also do transactions. Maybe you want to get, and then we actually have a list here. Maybe you want to get a certain set of transactions that you want to do. So this is very useful for, hey, I want to fetch all assets for a wallet address, not just on my contract, but maybe on multiple contracts, right? do I get everything that a wallet has? You can do that with insights. What if I want to get all of the sales of a skin in my in-game marketplace, right? I want to be able to see every time a user has purchased a skin. You can do that through insights. What if I want to do something a little bit more data reporting, right? I want to get monthly protocol fees within a last 12-month time frame. Again, this is all possible with insights because of the simple customization and API endpoints that you guys can use to build out what we call blueprints that you guys can use to get that data, right? So any sort of data read that you guys want to have, you can do through insights. And again, click that link in the chat to get started, or go through portal.thirdweb.com/insights and you can read more about it in our docs. That is the very big high level overview. That is a very kind of quick of what ThirdWeb is. I see we have some questions. Adriana, welcome back. How do you want to handle the question portion of the show?
Hello. Yes. Absolutely. Go for it. Answer the questions.
Cool.
Yeah. The stage is
Cool.
yours, of course.
So let's see. How do you customize a pre-built contract while maintaining security? Great question. So one, you can do as you saw earlier in the show, we talked about pre-builts through the CLI. So one thing that you can do is you can actually have these pre-builts as a base point on your CLI development, on your own contract development. So anything you pull in from our pre-builts, right? We have from our base contracts. All of these are already audited, so you know that that section of your contract is security compliant. Now, anything that you add additional to that and you want to push out into the world, right? We do recommend that you guys get audits on that stuff. So that way your community knows that, hey, this contract is okay. But anything that you use pre-built wise, we've already gone through and got auditors to review our code. Any of our pre-builts, we've already gone through and spent the money to get that audit review and ensure that it is security compliant for you all. And then Hal asks, what's the difference between an Open Zeppelin contract that you import and a ThirdWeb pre-built contract? Great question. So Open Zeppelin, it is its own entity. It is a very prominent figure in the Web3 space. And so Open Zeppelin has its own set of contracts that you can use. The ThirdWeb pre-built contracts will actually import some Open Zeppelin, as you saw earlier, and extend that functionality, right? So you can think of, okay, Open Zeppelin has its own contracts. I want to use that functionality, but I also want to add some additional stuff to it. So ThirdWeb pre-builts adds those additional components. For example, as you saw in the Open Zeppelin examples, all we did was have a function to mint, right? But we wanted some additional stuff. Maybe you want to be able to burn or transfer. You can actually do that by bringing in your Open Zeppelin contracts, add in these additional functions, which again, we've already done through our pre-builts, and then publishing out for your audience. So all of this stuff with our pre-builts has already happened. We've already added that additional functionality. We've already gone through the audit process for it. And so that's the main difference between the Open Zeppelin stuff and pre-builts.
Amazing. Are there any other questions? Joseph, you've been so good answering as we've gone along. So I think potentially all of them could have been answered, but if anyone has any last minute ones, do just pop them in the chat now. I just want to thank you, Joseph, straight away. The workshop was amazing. I'm sure everyone really, really enjoyed it. The recording will be out tomorrow. I'll send it on the Discord. And yeah, we've got another really exciting workshop tomorrow, actually. So I hope to see you guys then.
I can go ahead and send these slides so that everyone can come back and review them at their own pace.
That would be amazing. And then I'll put them in the link to the workshop recordings. That'd be great. So yeah, I just want to thank everyone for coming. Thank you again, Joseph, for an incredible presentation. And I hope everyone has a lovely day. And I will see you guys all tomorrow for the fourth workshop of the Rootstock Educate. Amazing. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me. Have a great rest of your day.